Hi everybody, Brian David Marshall here at the Tournament Center at the Magic the Gathering World Championship 2013. I am here with Reid Duke, who has just locked up his spot in the top 4. He's going to be playing on Sunday. He's going to be playing the modern format, and the deck he's playing, he's the only person playing this deck in the tournament, is Bant Hexproof. Well, it's not even really Bant Hexproof, is it?
Just white-green.
It's Selesnya Hexproof.
That's right.
So tell me why you chose this deck. I mean, you and I were waiting around before this to watch, to do this while the rest of the match starts. And we saw people playing Gideon and tapping out for Sphinx's Revelation, and playing all these kind of playing 4/4 elephants and all these kind of fairer, well, not that they're very fair, but you know what I mean, fairer cards. So what made you decide to play a hexproof enchantment-based deck?
Brian, for this tournament, I really just wiped the slate clean and started from square one in Modern. The two decks I'd played in the past, Jund and Storm, both are not what they used to be with the recent bannings of Seething Song and Bloodbraid Elf. So I was just like, okay, let me look for something completely new. And I thought of Hexproof as a strategy that used to be quite dominant in Modern, but has since fallen off the radar. So I made it my goal to find out why, if there even was a reason, was this deck no longer good. I picked it up, played a few matches, and I thought, A, that it was a really strong deck, B, that it was going to be strong against the most popular decks I expected to face here.
And what were those decks?
I guess my priorities in order were white, blue, red, Birthing Pod, Jund, and Scapeshift. And
that is a pretty good description of this field. I don't think I've really seen much of the way
nobody showed up with Scapeshift or Birthing Pod, but white, blue, red, and Jund were, far and away the most popular.
Okay, so let's take a look at what makes this deck tick. We'll start off looking at the creatures, and obviously, you may have heard of this deck be referred to as the Bogle deck.
Sure.
Slippery Bogle, Gladecover Scout are your two hexproof creatures. Talk to me about why you're playing these in a room full of planeswalkers and powerful spells.
Yeah, I'll be the first to admit they're pretty unimpressive when you take them on their own. In fact, my match against Josh, he Maelstrom Pulsed my enchantment, Abrupt Decay my enchantment, and then suddenly I had a couple Boggles and Scouts, and he had a 1/2 Deathrite Shaman, and my entire offense was stymied. I couldn't do anything. But these creatures are the cheapest hexproof creatures available. They come down on turn 1, which is really, really important against mana leak and remand when you're on the draw. You still get them in under permission. And you don't need anything special because the auras that you're putting on your creatures are what really do the heavy lifting. So 1/1 hexproof, 1 mana, it's all you need, just like simple.
And these are basically bulletproof baskets for your eggs, right?
Yeah.
Like, you put all your eggs in a basket. People talk about in Magic when you put all your enchantments on a creature and it gets doombladed. But that can't happen because they have hexproof.
Right, that's the key, hexproof.
Kor Spiritdancer is a card I remember loving quite fondly and limited. Talk about this card.
Now, there's two traditional ways to build the hexproof deck. One is with Kor Spiritdancer as the 2-drop, and the other is with Silana Ledgewalker, which of course is just one more hexproof creature. And a lot of people think, well, the point of this deck is that they can't target any of your creatures, all your removal's dead. But frankly, the Spiritdancer is just a really, really good card in a deck with 27 auras. I mean, there are, I mentioned Birthing Pod as one of the decks I really set out to prepare for, and that's a matchup where you're not playing fair, you're not killing one another's creatures, you're just throwing haymakers, and Kor Spiritdancer is really cannot be matched in that kind of game. You just machine gun through drawing cards, it gets giant for every aura attached to it, and once you're ready to give it trample or lifelink, there's really no beating you. And
again, you can attach the auras here and you still get to draw a card.
Right, absolutely.
And you don't when you cast them too, so that's
a really common play with the Spiritdancer if you're worried about them having a Doomblade or something like that. You just wait till you have 3 mana, you go Kor Spiritdancer, and then without passing priority, you cast an aura targeting your Scout. You get to draw a card, whether they have a removal or not, whether they have a counterspell or not. You're really not losing much.
Right, I saw that happen in your match with Josh Otherlane, actually. Yep. So, all right, let's take a look. You said 27 enchantments. We're going to need a couple slides to get through them all. Let's start
Okay,
here.
well, these ones are definitely the heavy hitters. Ethereal Armor is the best card in the deck, really. Because obviously 27 enchantments, and the fact that it gives first strike is quite important also. But the way I would describe the deck is step 1 is to make your creature giant, and Ethereal Armor and Daybreak Coronet are the perfect cards for that. Step 2 is to give your creature trample. Rancor, Unflinching Courage, lets you get through blockers, speeds up your clock.
You talked about Selesnya Ledgewalker and the evasion that has, but sometimes evasion is just running through walls, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could make your creature unblockable. You could play Spirit Mantle, protection from creatures. That's a common card. But I figured just, why go around when you could just go over the top?
Yeah.
So I opted for the trample enchantments for that role. And then step 3, after you have a giant creature with trample, is you give it lifelink just to really close the door on your opponent from coming back. And Unflinching Courage and Coronet really are the perfect cards because they fill multiple of those roles at the same time.
Just kind of interesting. I mean, you have the 3 Unflinching Courage, the 4 Daybreak Coronet. Daybreak Coronet is something that requires your creature to already have an aura attached to it.
Yeah.
Was there any thought to playing 3 of that, so you don't get a weird double Coronet draw? Or?
Really, it's just so good that you want 4 copies, and the consequence of that is, beyond the 7 of these lifelink auras, everything I have costs 1 mana, and the fact that it costs 1 mana gives the nod to my, my fringe auras over anything else that would cost 2 or 3, because it's just so good with the Coronet, also with the Spirit Dancer.
Okay, so let's look at page 2 of the creature enchantments.
Okay.
Keen Sense, I mean, this is a card, I love this when it was blue. I love it when it's green. Keen Sense is just I guess this was a future shifted or plane shifted version of Curiosity. So
Keen Sense is great. The fact that I have 1 mana hexproof creatures means I can usually be attacking with a keen sensed creature before the opponent's even done anything.
Right.
And refilling my hand. The trample enchantments allow you to continue drawing cards even through blockers.
Yeah, just to give you an idea about this, by the way, I've watched Reid attack through pretty fair sized Tarmogoyf and draw a card.
Yep.
It's pretty disgusting. So talk about the Umbras. Well, these seem like they're actually pretty key to making the deck work.
Right, when you think about the hexproof ability, it stops Doomblade, stops Abrupt Decay, everything like that. And one of the few ways that you can actually kill a hexproof creature was with a card like Wrath of God or Supreme Verdict. And the Umbras just put a stop to that, before it even begins. Totem Armor, if they play a Wrath of God, or if they somehow kill your creature in combat, it's, take away my 1 mana enchantment, go ahead, I have 100 others. And again, all 3 of these being 1 mana, super important, makes the deck quick, efficient, really good with the Coronet and the Spirit Dancer both. And
that's the spells in your deck. I mean, now we just moved to land. So let's take a look at the lands here. And 1 Dryad Arbor is, and now you have fetch lands in the deck, so you can actually get around to Liliana with a Dryad
perfect.
Arbor.
You leave a Misty Rainforest uncracked, and then anytime they make you sacrifice a creature, you're like, all right, in response, I'll get my useless Dryad Arbor and save my 2020 Bogle,
If you take one lesson away from this event, it's Misty Rainforest into your Dryad Arbor against Liliana.
Plus sometimes all you need to do is put some auras on a Dryad Arbor, and that's enough to win the game.
That's going to be pretty demoralizing for your opponent. So 1 Forest, 1 Wooded Bastion, 4 Temple Gardens. Let's move on. And then Horizon Canopy, how important is that ability to draw
Horizon Canopy is a huge draw to this color combination in general, but also this deck. As you saw, I only have 1 card that costs more than 2 mana, so if you happen to have a land-heavy draw, you just start sacrificing the canopies, you are really unlikely to run out of gas. And the fact that it comes into play untapped and adds both colors of mana is really just perfect.
Yeah, Razorverge Thicket, and then your 6 fetch lands that you're using.
Yeah, 6 fetch lands. You could play more, play less, but I found 6 was a pretty good number to usually have access to Dryad Arbor when you want it, but not take too much damage from constantly lightning bolting yourself getting Temple Garden.
So I saw you making some really interesting plays with your sideboard this weekend. Let's take a look at some of your sideboard cards. Rest in Peace to me was an all-star for you in maybe some matchups you weren't expecting to play it in.
Yeah, you look at this card, you think of it as a hate card against Living End or some other graveyard combo deck, but it's really surprisingly good against some of the normal decks.
I saw this in play against red, white, blue, and I saw this in play against Jund.
Yeah, Josh's deck, he has Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, and Scavenging Ooze. Yeah, and suddenly you take away those creatures, he doesn't have a lot to win with. And we ended up, I played Rest in Peace on turn 3 or 4. We played like a 20-turn game where he just couldn't attack me. You know, most of his creatures under normal circumstances are 5/6s, or you know, I can't do anything against them. But with a Rest in Peace in play, it really
yeah, he had a completely ineffectual army of Tarmogoyfs and Scavenging Oozes that only chump blocked for the entire game.
Right.
So that was pretty interesting. Grafdigger's Cage.
Grafdigger's Cage, similar role to Rest in Peace. The reason I split them is one, Grafdigger's Cage is really nice to bring in against Birthing Pod, because it stops the actual card Birthing Pod and Court of Calling, and you know, just having 3 graveyard hate cards is nice, but I split them because they do slightly different things, come in slightly different matchups.
This actually says cards can't enter from the library, so.
Yep.
And then Leyline of Sanctity, we've already seen what this deck does to, what this card does to decks that are using Duress or Inquisition.
I would say the Leyline is my best sideboard card, because in addition to stopping the cards you just named, the discard spells, it also stops the Liliana Edict. Right. So all the most common ways to lose to Jund, taken away by Leyline of Sanctity, also can come in against Storm, Scapeshift, or Burn, anything that's trying to attack you directly.
And by the way, they're both enchantments.
Right, for Ethereal Armor.
Which is pretty nice. So Stony Silence, speaking about artifacts.
Yeah, mostly against Affinity, also Tron, and also the single best card against this deck is Spellskite. So I have a variety of ways to handle Spellskite that I can mix and match according to, you know, what the matchup dictates.
Dismember seems like a card I haven't seen in many
right, it's
sideboards. Really
common to just see 4 Path to Exiles in this deck, but I've found the mono red burn to be an extremely good matchup between the lifelink enchantments and Leyline of Sanctity. So oftentimes I would much rather pay 4 life to get rid of a Spellskite than give them an extra land, especially in a matchup like red, white, blue. You don't want to boost their Sphinx's Revelations. You don't want to accelerate them to Wrath of God or Hallowed Burial. Dismember's a lot better.
Sure. Path to Exile, we've already talked about. And then Suppression Field, another enchantment that boosts your creatures and then does something pretty valuable against your opponents.
Yeah, good for a variety of reasons. Its main strength, I guess, would be against Birthing Pod, because the actual card Pod, many of their creatures, and Spellskite too. But it can come in a variety of matchups. It's worth noting that it really makes fetch lands inconvenient for the opponent. So I have my fetch lands myself, but if I have Suppression Field in my hand, obviously I could just use the fetch lands in my early turns.
So there you have it from Reid Duke. Banned Hexproof, a deck you might want to consider if you're tired of losing in Modern against red, white, blue, and Jund, and Birthing Pod, and all these other decks that are pretty prevalent. This is a strategy you might want to consider. It's been good enough to get this guy into the top 4 of the World Championship. What can it do for you at home? For Reid Duke, this is Brian David Marshall signing off from the Tournament Center.